Thanks for coming. Since this is a human-centered conference, I just want to say that all of these presentations were done by centered humans. And I'm going to start with mine. It's not quite an Ignite talk, because it's too early in the morning to get in the mood for an Ignite talk, but it's just it's a quick talk taking examples that we went out and Jen Hennel asked our Dutch curator, and we asked the curator of our Rothko show what are good examples, and our Stieglitz. So we wanted the real content people to plug into this, so it's not just always the technical folks and the developers making up use cases. So I'm going to kind of breeze through this now, and we're going to take questions at the end. We think we're going to finish fairly early with at least 20 minutes for questions.
Sorry.
So let's roll. My email address is up there, so if there's anybody that wants to know anything more about IIIF after today and you want to get in touch with us, we're really in a period now where we're evangelizing for the museum community. This group was formed essentially by the great academic libraries of the world. So these are the kind of the things we're going to show, how to compare and contrast the work of art, contextual details of an image, and narrative guide for looking. And yet one more we added at the end, managing accounts. Some are developed and some are ideas. So here are a couple of the use case scenarios that will show full screen.
Could you turn the mic on, please?
The mic?
Speak closer to the mic.
Speak closer to the mic. Okay. Sorry. All right. Those Van Goghs don't look like that, but you can't have color management everywhere you go. Okay. Okay. So these two are contextual details of an image, and it's a painting by Moreau. We'll see the full screen a little later, and a project in our CASVA Scholars program, which is dealing with large ancient Roman maps and then annotating different areas on the maps. And here are a couple of use case scenarios that are pointing you toward specific places for looking, and some ideas that if one wanted to show a video that you can actually write in time code and note this as an annotation, or there are hyperlinked words within the second piece. And this is the larger size of the map. We're kind of zooming in. Mirador is a presentation tool within IIIF that has pan zoom and lots of other cool stuff built in that we'll explain. So the Pantheon is highlighted there, and here we've added an annotation about it. And this, again, hyperlinks to much deeper context. And again, the Miro painting of the house, and then annotated with a photograph of the real house. And this is a Harvard self-portrait and an NGA self-portrait of Van Gogh. Pretty obvious comparisons that one can easily do. And within this essay, there are hyperlinks to details, where a detail is discussed, and so it's directed looking. So these are pretty straightforward use cases that you can get up and running any time on, and that seem to be used over and over again in lectures. This is a ship battle depicted in a painting, and our curator discussing it. And again, time code is called out for certain details. And this is 4 Rothko drawings from 1961. And the tools you see, the little circles, allow you to pan and zoom. George O'Keeffe, photographs by Alfred Stieglitz. We have a big Stieglitz project, one of, if not the best, Alfred Stieglitz collections, and this is going to be a web resource that we hope to launch sometime next year. And this will allow ostensibly anyone to drag down. Thematically, there'll be facets that you can choose, whether it's a landscape or New York City scenes, or we've got 8 or 10 of these that are suggested and most studied, but you can literally, when we have good search discovery tools, you can literally go to whatever you want to compare and compare. And this is self-portrait we have here, and the idea that starting within our own institution, if we're managing accounts, we can have a more of a measured understanding about who is annotating what. This is obviously something that we're just thinking about and for discussion, but it's just one way to go. So thank you very much, and I will hand off to Emmanuelle.
Thank you, Ellen. So I'm Emmanuelle Glass. I'm the collections data manager at the Yale Center for British Art. How is it for the sound? Yeah, I have a quiet voice, so I need to make sure you all hear me. So because of this year's theme, obviously, I wanted to look at IIIF today through the lens of rights. So I'll look at what we know our users want. Then I'll give a brief introduction of what IIIF is and what it allows users to do with museum images that is different from what they can already do today. And finally, I'll conclude with some thoughts about the networked environment and the opportunities that it offers for scholars. So in essence, my job today in the next few minutes is to really kind of give you good news. I'm going to give you an introduction of IIIF and tell you why it's going to make your lives easier. But let's start with the bad news, right? Yeah, we've been, museums, cultural institutions, we've been digitizing our collections for a long time. But in essence, we've created silos of content that don't speak to each other. And here's a typical example of what happens every day, multiple times a day. This is an example of a conservation report from the Yale Center for British Art that relies on images from multiple institutions. So the image on the left is our painting of Mrs. Robinson by Joshua Reynolds. The other images are of paintings in other collections that were found online. Some are by Reynolds, some others are after Reynolds. But the conservator, the Yale conservator, brought them all together in his treatment proposal report because Reynolds paintings are notoriously difficult to clean. And he really wanted to understand better the layering of paint, varnish, retouching, before proceeding with his treatment. And yes, it did take me more time to put this one slide together than all my slides in this slide deck. The images were scattered across websites that have different search logics, and once I found the images, they were not always downloadable in a very straightforward way. So clearly, the way we've been contributing our images to the networked environment is making it difficult for users to reuse, right? And I can think of a few reasons for that. The first one, of course, is the use of proprietary technology. Each museum is using a different technology that's not integrating with that of others. By using many different technologies that makes it hard for our users to use our assets, we have effectively isolated our users. And that's really created an obstacle to digital collaboration. Another obstacle is this kind of fusion between content and its presentation layer, right? Locking images in our websites is not so helpful. And if we want to make it easy for users to work with our images, we have to provide them in a more portable fashion. And this lack of interoperability between image silos is one of the main obstacles to efficient and scalable image-based research. And it's important because this lack of interoperability between image repositories has a damaging effect on the development of scholarship, which is really exactly the opposite of what museums really set out to do, isn't it? So it's not a good situation for users. And yet we know what our users want. As Alan started to draft just now, our users want to have easy access to images, regardless of what institution produces them. They want to know what they can do with those images. They want to manipulate them, and they want to collaborate with colleagues across the world. And frankly, scholars would be grateful if we gave them access to updated images without having to become digital asset managers, right? And I'm showing two, it's hard to tell on the screen, but two images of Mrs. Robinson. So the one on the left is before treatment, and on the right is after. And basically, showing the after treatment image on our website was helpful because during treatment we realized that the blurb that's below her right hand is actually the face of somebody else upside down, right? So, I mean, scholars could have a go at this and start to work with, how did Reynolds use his canvases and so forth, right? So that's going to be super important to have access to updated images. And also, I bet users would be grateful if they did not need to become kind of PowerPoint ninjas, right? When they want to share their findings with colleagues, that's always, yeah. Anyway, so these are as many obstacles that the IIIF sets out to overcome by providing a uniform access to a network of distributed image repository. Currently, IIIF consists of 4 APIs. 2 of these, the Image API and Presentation API, went through their second major revision, while the Search and Authentication APIs are now 1.0. And each API addresses a specific set of functionality required for effective image interoperability. The Image API provides a method for requesting from a server a whole or partial image with transformation of scale, rotation, and color quality. The Presentation API exposes information about the images associated with an object. And it's worth noting here that this metadata can be fairly light. It could be just enough to give the users a sense of what they are interacting with. And the Presentation API relies heavily on the shared canvas and open annotation data models. Presentation API can also include the sequence in which the images of the object should be viewed. We're going from collection to manifest to sequence to, right? The Search API provides a method for requesting, for searching annotations that are associated with an object or image. And those annotations can be notes made by a scholar during their research, or they could be machine-generated OCR text. The Authentication API specifies how a data provider can serve access, control IIIF content, and direct users to institutional login services. This is also the means, I think, where institutions can devise how they want to keep some IIIF projects private, if they wanted to. So taken all together, these APIs really kind of provide a model for client-server interaction that can be used by image viewing and annotation tools such as Mirador and the universal viewer. And there are other image viewers. Those are two, but there are a few others. And IIIF does not lock you into using a particular one. And actually, we started to see several institutions that now use several image viewers for the same core group of images, but with specific audiences or different purposes in mind. And IIIF is also useful when it comes to working with platforms outside of it, such as research space or conservation space, which David will be talking about in a minute. So my museum, the Yale Center for British Art, makes available via IIIF through our online collections catalog all the images of our works in the public domain. And so far, that's about 70,000 images for about 30,000 works. We don't have images for everything, and the bulk of those are going to be, so all of our paintings, drawings, and prints. We're catching up with prints, and sculptures, of course. And the logo here, down below the image ribbon, is the way we indicate that these images are IIIF manifest. So each object record online that has a IIIF manifest has this logo on it. And this is what our IIIF manifests look like, collections of images per object. Jeff will show a different take on manifests in a minute too. You've seen this through Alan, right? I've just brought two of our Turner paintings through the image viewer that we've chosen, which is Mirador. And here I'm going to drag and drop IIIF manifest or image into our Mirador, and that image on the right is coming from the Beaudet Digital Library out in Oxford. So it's a really a fantastic tool to kind of bring together different images from different repositories. I've talked about metadata a little bit before, so this is a screenshot of what we're doing. We're actually not being so light on the metadata at the center, but that's up to you to choose. And to make it even easier on the users, we've actually included links. I don't show it here, but we've included links back to our native environment. So in addition, a number of IIIF image viewers come with annotation functionality. Again, it's really all about putting at users' fingertips kind of a wonderful tool and powerful tool to conduct their research. And here I'm showing two Tudor paintings that our conservators are trying to prove may have come from the same workshop. And they document their findings directly within the Mirador platform. So we're kind of really starting to see research kind of unfold in front of our eyes here. British paintings from that time period are usually not signed, and it's really hard to find primary material documentation on them. So the project team literally has to build up their scholarly arguments for the reattribution of the paintings by compiling images and technical conservation images. But let's go back to rights for a moment, right? Images that are made available as IIIF assets have been vetted by their institutions. So users don't have to guess what they have the right to do with them anymore. So let's be clear, right? I mean, IIIF is not going to clear image rights for institutions. That work still needs to be done. But providing images as IIIF assets really kind of sends a clear signal out there that images are fine to be reused. So once you get to a IIIF level, that's yours to work with. And here I'm showing the Yale open access policy that we adopted in 2011. And because of this policy, we could just, when IIIF came around, just lay over IIIF over our delivery mechanism. So what are the IIIF benefits? Well, it really kind of offers a simple solution to a big obstacle. It offers a web-based image viewer, on top of a network of interoperable digital resources. And so why is it better than what we have now? Well, it really supports collaboration between colleagues. It offers a free tool to manipulate images. And again, the results are up to date. And so for the museum, what are the advantages? It's great about providing access to our assets through multiple channels, right? Well, everybody doesn't need to come to a website anymore, our website. And it's really talking about our resources as modular pieces that can snap onto other people's technologies, which is a very strong argument for IIIF. And because we're talking about humans in this conference, it's also worth noticing that it's very strongly based in an active community of folks. And I'll do a little shameless plug for the next conference here. But so just to conclude, it's, with IIIF, we start to get to a place where it's easier to work with digital assets. And that really speaks plenty about how museums engage with their audiences. Making images available in such a way sends a really strong message that the museum is putting users' needs first. And I think that's what we need to come back to as research institutions, but museums as well. Thank you.
Okay, how's this? Good? Good. Let's see. I am going to I'll talk about what's been going on at Harvard with IIIF and Mirador and all this good stuff. And here we go. Yeah, okay, Harvard's been invested in all of this for quite some time, to the point where Harvard has its own little website, IIIF.harvard.edu, that kind of covers the projects that have made use of some of this stuff. It originated a while ago for a Harvard X course on the book, which featured a whole bunch of medieval manuscripts as paged objects that would be part of this online course platform. And it sort of demanded a more sophisticated viewer for zooming and looking at these very detailed manuscripts. You can read more about it through this link here, or just go to Harvard X and sign up for the course and take it. But the great thing is that, there are all these library people doing all this stuff about implementing IIIF at Harvard, and the museums are kind of sitting out here as their own little business on the side, and then they come along and tell us, well, we have this technology that we put on top of the library's digital repository, which happens to be the place in which we store all of our museum images and deliver them from. So all of a sudden, the museum's got like 250,000 images automatically delivered via the IIIF image API, which is great. Which I can sit back and scratch my head. Well, I didn't have to do any technical implementation. So what do I do with this stuff now? So I don't want to talk about any technical stuff really, but I want to sort of push down the avenue. Well, if you have all of these pieces of infrastructure like the image API and a presentation manifest server running, and you can install Mirador, which is really dead simple. It's like, what does this mean for our museum, and what do we do? Yeah, so here's our take of rendering IIIF presentation manifests in the Mirador viewer. These are just some of the objects from our collection, and you can quickly see it's a nice, at least in this list view, before you even get into the deep zoom viewer portion, you get a nice overview of 3D objects with multiple views in one shot, black and white and color images, and it really starts to hint at how you can look at the macro and micro in one place and really switch contexts quite nicely. I always sort of beat my head against the wall wondering what to do with manifests. Well, because we see them rendered for books and other kinds of objects, but that's not it. That's not the end of the road. So here's a rendering of each of the galleries in our museums as manifests. So everything in the gallery, each line is a gallery in our museum and an image of every object that's in the museum. So hey, we can very quickly present everything that's going on within the physical space itself and allow people to sort of weave their way through and immediately see juxtapositions you would never see in the physical space or even in the way we present our collections online. We have American art next to Islamic art. They just don't ever share the same gallery space, but here they can share the same virtual space. And, you could start to ask fun new questions. Once you dig into an object or a manifest in Mirador Viewer in particular, you can start to do fun things with the multi-up functionality, like, hey, here are a bunch of galleries in the museum. Show me a variety of faces in the objects that are currently on view. And it's dead simple because you're clicking around on pretty pictures and you're zooming in and you're reorienting them in very natural drag and drop and zoom ways that you're used to using with like Google Maps and all those kind of interfaces. You can just start to ask new questions about your collection through these tools and the way they manipulate your data. Beautiful thing with a lot of these tools is that they're designed to scale quite nicely. So if we take the notion of viewing our galleries if we take the notion of producing our galleries as manifests and throwing them into the Mirador Viewer and then throwing the Mirador Viewer on a large video wall, now you can see across the entire museum in one snapshot. I should also say we have a very small museum, barely 1,500 objects in one on view, so seeing them on a video wall is not a problem for those of you with enormous museums, You just have to scale your thumbnails down or something like that. But again, you can imagine standing in front of this, and if you had the right kind of interface, just start to draw lines through it, and just very naturally, in a very ad hoc way, draw connections, and then tease those out, bring those images up, and again, start to ask new questions of your collection. Take the notion of finding faces throughout the museum even further by having Mirador Viewer configured in a multi-up on 9 screens, park a class in front of it, and start to have some interesting discussions, then send them off into the gallery to find these things. So this is all about using these tools to facilitate new ways of working with in our museum. Okay, but this is kind of boring stuff. So let's sort of dive in a little bit more to some experiments. Of how you can knit all this stuff together. We have a lot of photographs in our collection. So here's a photograph that I happened to run through something, Google Vision's service, which is pretty awesome. It does a few things. It extracts, it identifies faces, it identifies text, and it'll do automatic tagging of your imagery. And tucked away in the middle of the screen is a bounding box. It's just dimensions, an upper corner, an upper left, upper right, bottom left, and bottom right of a face it found. Which is pretty cool because then you could take that same data and you can render, effectively annotations on top of the images of where we found the faces. If you are, even remotely competent at coding, you could take that same bounding box information and transform it into a IIIF image API call. And you get a couple URLs. The key thing to understand is that this is one image. This is one image. We're rendering a full view of the image with the annotations on top, and then we're rendering just the faces. No pixels were harmed in this. This is one image. We're using the region functionality of the image API. It's dead simple. This is not a complicated use of this technology, but you can start to tease things out like that in a view in a way that you've just never possibly thought you could do before. But I guess this is a little flip on the conference topic. I'm using machines to actually do a lot of this computation so that humans could then use it. Is that logical? All right, so fun, right? Yeah. How about if we scale it across a whole bunch of photographs? All these are just IIIF image API calls for the regions within the individual photos where those faces exist. I did no slicing and dicing of the actual photos. They're all derived from our master photos on the fly. If you want to play with this, there is a live URL. Come find me. I'm happy to share it. Pretty fun. I like to equate the image API to being a pair of non-destructive scissors. Again, one image exists on our server, and we're just plucking out regions at will. One last fun bit about all this. So again, once you have all this technology and you knit it all together, what else can you do with it? And I hope some of this, if any of you are in the open culture session yesterday, you can see sort of a logical extension of the ideas presented there. If we open our data through these new bits of technology, there are different types of people who are going to latch onto them and start to do some very creative things with them. Hopefully this is inspiring you to think down those lines. So here we have our Van Gogh self-portrait rendered in Mirador. Of course, this is a IIIF manifest that's pointing to IIIF images in the API thrown into the Mirador viewer so all of you humans can see this stuff. And as I already pointed out, Mirador has a great set of annotation tools, and we have a lot of great scholars out there doing some really great stuff with annotating images and doing research, but I'm not a scholar. It's not that interesting to me in a lot of ways. I thought Van Gogh could be a bit cooler. So we don't need to use annotation tools just for identifying things in the images. We can use them to make our images better. And because Mirador support, is all backed by IIIF, we can bring in images from other collections on the fly and make them cooler too. And again, the presentation API and Mirador, in my mind, is a really awesome form of non-destructive graffiti. No pixels were harmed. The annotations are just a layer on top of the images coming from the source repository. I'm not changing the image. I'm merely adding my layer on top of it. It's a great collaging tool. It really sort of you gotta just sort of break out of your mental mold sometimes and really try to take these tools to a new level. So, and this is an ancient bronze in our collection. I thought it needed headphones and whatever, some music or something like that. So go forth, make fun things with all this technology. Thanks.
All right, so now that you've seen some of the cool stuff that IIIF can do, how do you communicate to executives who might want to fund your trips to IIIF conferences or to conferences like this to learn more and collaborate with your colleagues and buy infrastructure, et cetera? So as Emmanuelle already covered, IIIF I think of it as really three things. It's a set of standards, it's a collection of open source software, and it is a community of stakeholders. And right now there's a lot of momentum behind the community, and a lot of interesting things are happening, and the standards are moving pretty quickly. So why should executives at museums care about the fact that you're saying you want to do some IIIF? Well, it supports the museum mission. It gets your images out to a greater audience in a much more interactive and interesting way. And it certainly saves time and money. I mean, the image API alone, if you can avoid creating thousands of derivatives to fit the designs on your website, for example, just by creating a URL from the original source, you avoid a lot of duplicate storage, a lot of extra coding, moving images around, duplicating metadata, all kinds of advantages like that. IIIF adoption by GLAMs is increasing rapidly. The distribution, or the discussion list is growing at about 100%. There is a museum interest group that anyone can join, and it's quite large. And museum software vendors are slowly announcing support for the IIIF standards in their products, and I know that DAM Vendors, one who happens to be here, is very interested in it. So it is, it's getting some real traction. I'm not going to go through these demos, but if you're speaking to executives, it was effective in my organization to go through some relevant demonstrations that show the types of features that you would like to build within your organization and relate that to multiple active project needs. It makes quite an impact. Conservation Space there at the bottom is a document management system that's built for conservators. It's a cloud-based solution, although it could be hosted locally. The important point and the relationship to IIIF is that I believe it's the first application, the first web application that has the Mirador viewer fully integrated inside of the application. So I think when the Mirador tool was originally conceived of, it was thought that you would open Mirador and then you'd pull all these resources into it and look at the works that way. And that's still true because you have full screen mode. But by and large, what we're finding is that people want to take Mirador and actually embed it in applications, whether it's a content management system for a website or an application like Conservation Space. And so the Conservation Space project worked very closely with Stanford and Harvard, who employ the two primary developers for Mirador over the last year, and also working very openly and transparently with the community to talk about requirements that Conservation Space had and negotiating how we could realize everybody's needs in the tool. And then when you engage the IIIF community, what happens? Your organization benefits, and it's not really a large commitment. In fact, it can be a rather small commitment. It is important to engage, though, as opposed to just consuming the outcomes of the product. By engaging, what you're doing is ensuring that your interests are being met, the interests of your museum, and you're also bringing more use cases, and you're making for a richer and more robust set of APIs and tools. And then if you really want to get involved, you can help to sustain the community financially. You can come to conferences and hackathons. And all the way down at the bottom there is Sheila Rabun's email address. She is the new community face for IIIF, and she's coordinating all the outreach activities and organizing the conferences. So you can contact her for more information. So about 2 weeks ago, there was a large community meeting in the Netherlands, and I wanted to just give a quick summary of what went on there. So IIIF is really expanding beyond the IT group, as Alan mentioned. Scholars and art historians are getting involved, and that's really the right way of doing it, of identifying real use cases and letting the technologists figure out how to make that happen, as opposed to the technologists proposing the use cases themselves. So presentation authoring tools are starting to emerge. So what I mean by that is that presentation layer with drawing the annotations to enhance the images. The tools are actually starting to come to the market in the open source community where you can pull up an image, zoom to whatever region you want, add another image into that same manifest. So you can create these ad hoc collections of images on the fly, and then we hope soon to be able to actually save those manifests. And in fact, there are some tools based on Leaflet.js that are doing just that to an internal endpoint. So people are starting to actually use UIs to create presentation manifests instead of creating them by hand. Richer capabilities to present the images together are starting to emerge. So audio and visual resources are being considered, not just images. And there was a lot of discussion in The Hague about that. And what it really amounts to is adding the dimension of time to a presentation. So you can imagine that an image appears, and 5 seconds later, an audio starts to play, and then perhaps the original image fades out and another one fades in, and another audio plays, and then at the end of that, the next canvas kind of slides in. So we're adding time really adds an element of interest. It enables richer stories to be told, and all be done in a standards compliant way. So the existing APIs, image presentation, search, those are in a maintain but extend to accommodate for new use cases. There's some syntax cleanup, some technical considerations of HTTP2 and HTTPS only trending, and those are regularly under review and discussion for potential improvements. There's a new discovery API that we discussed in The Hague, which is quite interesting. There have been a lot of efforts over the years to take art collections and make them available to aggregators for indexing and searching. So if you wanted to find all of the works by a particular artist, if all museums participated, maybe that would be possible. The discovery API is one vector for possibly realizing that. And the intention is to be able to find IIIF resources like images, but really it's about finding the underlying art objects. And so it's about creating a central repository where museums will be able to publish their collections, and then aggregators would be able to read that registry and decide which institutions they wanted to go and fully index the collections and then present faceted searches and things. So Art Store and Europeana were very interested in that in our breakout of the museum interest group. And related to that, what we're seeing is an emergence of verticals. So there's museums as one group, newspapers, libraries. It could be medical imaging next. So IIIF has to be careful about not specifying detail that would not be or that would be too deep into these verticals. And so what that means is that the museum community is going to have to come together and talk about what does it mean for metadata standards if we want to provide object data to Europeana and Art Store through the IIIF APIs, through the discovery channels. It's also going to allow for notifications of updates to images and objects, so that's being factored in. So this API is really in the preliminary discussion phase. The authentication API, I think it was very close to ratification at The Hague, and I don't think it'll be very long before it is, but it basically lets an institution indicate to a IIIF client what resources are available given its security context. So if you didn't provide a token, then the server might say, well, if you were to authenticate here, then I have these other resources available. Otherwise, I'm going to give you a smaller one, or you're not going to see it at all, for example. The audio and visual API is, as I mentioned, doing what the image API does, but for audio and video. And it also affects the presentation API because the element of time, if you imagine the canvas having a duration, then when these actors enter the stage of the canvas and start playing, the AV has a duration as well, unlike image. And drag and drop is currently a feature, but it's a non-spec feature, and there will probably be a very small API to support that. So the museum interest group session, as I mentioned, there was a lot of interest in the discovery API, and hopefully we'll have some kind of a pilot group working with aggregators to get some standards and prototyping implementations going for discovery. The Mirador community talked about having more frequent releases and working on a roadmap and really empowering more developers to participate in the community. And there, like I said, there's a lot of momentum behind IIIF. It started with libraries, now it's museums and newspapers, and more verticals emerging. So I think we have time for questions.
I just want to add that if you want to get involved in the monthly phone calls or as a developer, there's a lot of links on the IIIF website, which is iiif.io. Any questions?
Are there plans to create a simplified package that museums can take and easily implement? We recently developed a collection using all of these open source tools, and the community was very helpful in getting us to the point where we were able to push it out the door, but it's a pretty steep learning curve we found, and you know, some of the tools or when working with the images files aren't open source, and so it proved to be, you know, it's great, but it's not simple. And so, like, I wonder if there's a plan to simplify things to make it so that there's a easier adoption by others.
I just want to jump in a second. There are a number of small companies that could act as service providers that you could talk to. That's starting to happen now.
Yeah, I've used one before. I can talk to you afterwards, but yeah, you kind of just throw your images at them, and then they provide the infrastructure. It's not. Yeah. It wasn't very expensive.
So we want this to be available to museums of any size who may not have software developers on staff. So,
Okay.
yeah.
And if you use a DAM, you know, hopefully in the future, DAMs will more, you know, be more embracing of IIIF moving forward.
Right.
In the back.
That was actually going to be my question. I was going to follow up to your comment that, you know, my museum is a smaller museum, and we've kind of been on the fence about how to implement a second image server and manage older dams and an image server. And I think one of the newer strategies that's emerging is, you know, our dams is open source, but we're working with our developers to make that dams natively IIIF compliant, so we can just generate IIIF APIs from our dams. That seems to be a great solution for us, so we don't have to have a second image server. But I was wondering the panel if there was any update. I know there was some talk about a letter to dams vendors. Has there been any conversations at this conference about that?
So the Museum Interest Group talked about that in, was it the last call that we had?
Yep.
And I think there was a lot of support for it. The difficulty is, we even talked about, why don't we print the letter out and people that come to our session can literally sign it, right? But there was concern that we didn't want to represent our institutions, you know, as ourselves, you know, that we may not have the people here, by and large, probably don't have that authority. And so that there was going to be some follow-up with folks in with the respective people in those institutions, like the CIOs or the directors, to sign such a letter. So I believe that effort is going to continue. It's going to probably take a little while. Interestingly, a dam vendor I was speaking with yesterday, when I told them about this letter, they said, "Oh, can I get a copy of it?" And I said, "Well, sure. I don't have a problem giving you a copy. It would probably be more effective if I went back to my institution and had my CIO sign it, and then I'll give you a copy so that it's official. But it's only going to be National Gallery of Art. It wouldn't be Yale, Harvard, Met, you know. because those institutions still have that legwork to do. I don't know, it can take some time for some larger institutions to get that approval.
Okay.
I was just going to say, I think it was like maybe in the last couple of days, there's enough support, so they might be forcing, themselves into competitively. So
Right.
The first one's already happened, so then you might be able to just push them over the line.
Yes, yes. I think once the ball gets rolling, it'll pick up steam.
Yeah, and now that we actually know people who work for AAM, Rob Stein and Liz Neely, we hope to use AAM, at least in the States, as a channel to smaller and middle-sized museums and have that discussion about how we can get them up and running.
This is more of an implementation question or a concern, but I've noticed when I tried to implement IIIF for a few institutions I'm involved with, the smaller institutions who use shared hosting, most of the tools available require administrative rights to install. We have the skills and everything else we need to get this running, except that the hosting and the tools available don't match up. There's no modularity to it. Is there something that I'm not aware of, a solution that I'm not aware of? What would you recommend for institutions that have to use shared hosting?
Well, the IIP server I know is installable as a Red Hat module directly, so that might be
but it
one
also
channel.
requires administrative privileges.
Yeah. Maybe some of these companies that are providing the service, I mean, that sounds like the best approach, I think, to outsource that.
And to ask the question on one of our community discussion groups.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Rob?
Yeah, you can run Loris without root access, without privileges. But the issue will be that you'll still need to have your web server somehow point through to Loris. So you're going to need some way of getting onto port 80, which requires admin privileges. So,
Sometimes if you ask the shared hosting provider, they'd be kind enough to install an extra module for you.
I tried.
Sometimes they might,
A lot of bureaucracy.
they might be willing, if ImageMagick, which I think Loris uses behind the scenes, is much more commonly used and is used, for example, by PHP and many other scripting languages. That may already be available on the server without any additional installation, and then because Loris is, it's Python code, so as long as the server supports interpreting Python, you'll be able to do it. And then if you were doing a level 0 implementation, that can be just written in any scripting language, Ruby, Python, PHP, and it won't need any additional. If you're just doing level 0, which is basically providing access to the images you already have, then you don't need any kind of back-end executable code running. So there are some possibilities in that transition until maybe more vendors get on board.
For sure.
And I believe there's some Drupal plugins for, is that for Mirador? I'm pretty sure. Yeah, it's for Mirador.
National Library of India.
Okay. Yeah. So on the client side. Yeah.
Have a few more minutes. Any other questions?
I've got one question. Is that one of the things that drew me to this framework at first is the simplicity of it. And over the last couple of years, I can see more and more things, and there's more and more people coming into the community, which is a good thing. But I can also see that simplicity maybe being eroded away when we're kind of at the point where we're really evangelizing about it, and it's becoming harder to describe to people what it is, essentially. I was just wondering if you had any thoughts.
We've gone away from MVP, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, because the image API itself, so I'm a bit like Jeff, I do the fun stuff, and I can see, I'm not a museum person, I'm a technical guy, and I love what I can do with those images, and the presentation API makes sense to me. But as we go more like the authentication one, there are issues around that. This is very much about interoperability and getting images out there. I understand the reasons that some institutions need the authentication API, but it seems like more things are happening, which is great, but I'm keen for it not to kind of, go too far out and then it becomes so complicated to explain to leadership that it kind of draws it back. into the next.
What do you think, Rob?
So, as one of the editors of the specs, we feel that every day. So our approach is to, first of all, as Emmanuelle and David said, require use cases up front, right? So no change without a use case. Every book its librarian, every museum its painting. But yeah, use cases aren't enough, right? It needs to be implementable. So for any change to the spec, we also require 2 implementations of it before it reaches the final sort of 1.0 or 3.0 for the next versions. So for authentication, yes, it's complicated. And the complications are around the interaction with web browsers across different institutions. So it looks to the browser like you're trying to hack into things, which we kind of are, right? You're trying to get credentials from one place and give them to another place so that you get access to images, which is what we want to do, but it's really hard to walk that fine line between cross-site forgery and just a nice use of a cookie. Yeah. For the authentication API, to go back to what Emmanuelle was saying, well, if it's really hard to make it authenticated and restrict access, and it's really easy to make it open access, hopefully that'll prompt some discussions in museums and in the cultural heritage sector about following sort of open content policies. We can spend a lot of money and lock everything down, or we can spend no money and make it available for free. Well, it seems like a relatively easy proposition, but yeah. So hopefully that addresses some of the concerns.
I probably feel your pain, and I'm glad that that's. I'm kind of glad you have the pain, because it means that you're thinking about it, but I still feel sorry for you. Thank you.
I just had a comment on that. My goal through like a lot of these examples is to show people the potential, so then the implementers go off and implement it, and it permeates everything, and it becomes invisible to those who want to use it in whatever. Let's say 5 years. Let's be optimistic. We could just be users. We actually don't even need to know IIIF is a thing, and we go off and have fun. But so all you implementers, get to it.
Exactly.
And you don't have to embrace all the capabilities.
Yeah.
I mean, the image API alone is worth pursuing, and it's also probably the simplest part. Yeah.
And the most powerful.
I mean, you need
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, you need it. You need it. So that's where to start.
And you can have fun now. You don't have to wait 5 years. Well, thank you for coming. So.